They fell in love in the silence of the nights, but the owner of the farm found out. Whitmore Plantation, Mississippi, 1857. The full moon illuminated the cotton fields when Samuel Whitmore saw Abigail for the first time, truly, not as property, not as a slave, but as a person. She was kneeling on the riverbank, her hands clasped in silent prayer, tears streaming down her face. Samuel had gone out for a ride, something he did when guilt kept him awake at night. He was 24 years old and had just returned from Boston, where he had studied theology for 3 years. Boston had changed Samuel. There he met abolitionists, black preachers, people who made him question everything he had learned on his father's farm. He saw churches where black and white people worshipped together. He heard sermons about how everyone was equal before God. And now he was back in the hell he called home. "Sorry," he said softly, making Abigail jump in fright. "I didn't mean to scare you." Abigail quickly wiped away her tears and lowered her eyes, as she had been trained to do. "Mr. Samuel, I shouldn't be here. Master Whitmore said that no slave can leave the slave quarters after the bell rings." "My father doesn't need to know everything," Samuel replied, dismounting from his horse. And then he did something unthinkable. He sat down beside her on the grass. "Were you praying?" Abigail hesitated. Even prayer could be dangerous if done the wrong way. Master Whitmore, Samuel's father, allowed the slaves to go to church on Sundays, but only to hear sermons about obedience and submission preached by a white pastor. Any other expression of faith was considered rebellion. "Yes, sir," she finally admitted. "My mother, she was sold today. I'll never see her again." Samuel felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. He'd seen the transaction happen that morning, but he'd been hiding in his room, too cowardly to confront his father. A merchant from Charleston had offered good money for Abigail's mother, and Master Whitmore never refused good money. "I'm sorry," Samuel said, and for the first time in his life, he truly understood the weight of those words. "You don't need to feel anything," Abigail replied, her voice breaking. "You're white, you're free, you can't understand." "You're right," Samuel admitted. "I can't understand it, but I want to try." Abigail finally looked at him, really looked, and saw something that surprised her. Genuine shame, real pain. This was not the typical son of a slave owner. This one was different. "Why do you care?" she asked. "Why would Jesus care?" Samuel replied simply. "And if I say I follow Christ, but I don't care about the suffering right in front of me, then my faith is a lie." Something changed in that moment. A connection was formed, delicate as spiderwebs, but strong as forged steel. They talked until the sky began to lighten. Samuel spoke about Boston, about the sermons he had heard, about how the Bible his father used to justify slavery was the same one abolitionists used to condemn it. Abigail spoke of her faith, a deep faith, tested in the fire of daily suffering. She told of the secret services in the slave quarters, where they sang spirituals that were both prayers and maps to freedom. She spoke of a God who sees the oppressed, who hears the cries of the wronged. "My mother always said, God may not come when you want him to, but he always arrives at the right time," Abigail shared. "I want to believe that, but some days it's hard." "Keep believing," Samuel pleaded. "Please." When they parted ways that morning, they both knew that something had begun, something dangerous, something impossible, something inevitable. The meetings by the riverbank became regular. Samuel and Abigail met in the silence of the nights, always cautious, always terrified of being discovered. What began as conversations about faith slowly transformed into something deeper. Samuel began teaching Abigail to read, a crime punishable by whipping or worse. He brought his own Bible, and by the light of a small lantern they deciphered verses together. Galatians 3:28, Abigail read slowly, her voice trembling with emotion. There is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus." "They are all one," Samuel repeated, his eyes fixed not on the page, but on Abigail. "If Paul was right, then all of this plantation, this slavery, this division, all of this is blasphemy." "Be careful with those words, Lord Samuel," Abigail warned. "Thoughts like that can kill you as quickly as they can kill me." "Then at least we died for the truth," Samuel replied. But it wasn't just theology that united them, it was humanity. Samuel began to see Abigail not as the romantic ideal of a noble cause, but as a complete woman, her sharp intelligence, which slavery tried to stifle, her dry humor, which survived despite everything, her strength, which humbled him, and Abigail, against all common sense, began to see him not as an enemy, but as an ally. More than that, as someone she could love. "This is madness," she whispered one night when Samuel held her hand for the first time. This can't happen." "Why not?" Samuel challenged. "Because my father says no? Because a rotten society says no? Abigail, if God created us all equal, then our love is not a crime. It's everything else that is a crime." "Beautiful words," Abigail replied, pulling her hand back. "But words don't change anything. I'm still your property. You still own me, whether you like it or not. And if anyone finds out—" She didn't need to finish. They both knew what happened to enslaved women who seduced the sons of their masters. They knew about Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, about all the dark secrets hidden in the great houses. The difference was that those relationships involved power and coercion. What Samuel and Abigail shared was different. It was choice. It was mutual. It was real love. But would that matter if they were discovered? The first person to suspect was Mammy Ruth, the elderly cook who had raised Samuel since he was a baby. She saw the way he looked at Abigail during meals. She noticed how he always found excuses to be near the slave quarters at nightfall. One afternoon, she confronted him. "Samuel Whitmore, do you know what you're doing?" "I love her, Mammy," Samuel admitted, unable to lie to the woman who had raised him. Mammy Ruth closed her eyes, pain piercing her face. "Boy, I love you as if you were my own son, but this can't have a happy ending. Your father will kill you. And if he doesn't kill you, he'll sell you so far away that you'll never see her again." "Then let's run away," Samuel said, the decision forming as he spoke. "North, Canada, where we'll be free." "Do you think it's that simple? You're going to leave everything behind, your inheritance, your family, your life, and her? If they capture her along the way, it will be worse than death." "Mom, I can't live in this place anymore. I can't wake up every day seeing people being treated like cattle. I can't pretend everything is okay." Mammy Ruth sighed deeply. "Your heart is in the right place, boy. But a good heart isn't for whips. A good heart isn't for hunting dogs. A good heart isn't for bad men." She was right, of course, but Samuel was beyond reason now. He started planning, escape routes, contacts on the Underground Railroad, hidden money, and Abigail, despite all her fear, began to have hope. Hope was the most dangerous thing a slave could have. They didn't know that someone was already watching. Silas, the overseer, had noticed Samuel's nightly absences, and Silas was loyal to only one person, Master Whitmore. The storm was forming. It was on a June night, when the air was heavy with the promise of rain, that everything collapsed. Samuel and Abigail were in their usual spot, by the riverbank. But tonight was different. Samuel had brought a small ring, simple, made of iron, that he himself had hammered. It wasn't gold, it wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. "Abigail," he said, kneeling before her, "I know I can't give you the marriage you deserve. Not here, not now. But before God, at this moment, I make you a promise. You are my wife, and I am your husband, and I will spend every day of my life leading you to a place where we can be free." Tears streamed down Abigail's face as she extended her hand, letting him place the ring on her finger. Samuel Whitmore. Before God I do, in joy and in sorrow, in freedom and in prison, until death do us part. They kissed as the first drop of rain fell. It was the purest, holiest moment they had both ever experienced. It was also the last moment of peace they would have, because Silas was hiding in the trees, and he had seen everything. He ran back to the big house, straight to Master Whitmore's room. "Sir, sir, wake up! It's about Mr. Samuel." Jonathan Whitmore, a 55-year-old man whose face had been hardened by decades of greed and cruelty, woke up angry. "This better be important, Silas." "Yes, sir. I saw Samuel with the slave girl Abigail. They were together as husband and wife." The silence that followed was more terrifying than any scream. Master Whitmore rose slowly, his voice dangerously calm. "Show me." When they reached the river, Samuel and Abigail had already left, but the ring had fallen onto the grass during the kiss. Master Whitmore picked it up, his hands trembling, not with sadness but with fury. "My own son," he whispered, "my own son corrupted by a black woman." "What do you want me to do?" Silas asked. "Bring them. Both of them. Now." The hunt began immediately. Dogs were released, men were woken, torches were lit. The night filled with barks and cries as the Whitmore plantation transformed into a hunting ground. Samuel heard the commotion before he saw it. "They know. We need to run, now." They ran through the dark fields, Abigail tripping over her long skirt, Samuel pulling her forward. They had planned to flee next week when everything was ready. But now there was no choice. The dogs were closing in. Samuel could hear his father shouting orders. "Alive or dead, I don't care." "Samuel, leave me," Abigail pleaded, breathless. "They'll forgive you if you go back alone. Leave me and save yourself." "Never," Samuel swore. "We live together or we die together. There is no other option." They came to a crossroads. To the left, the road to the north, and eventual freedom, if they could survive. To the right, the local church, where Reverend Thomas Hayes lived. "The church," Abigail said suddenly. "Perhaps the Reverend can help us. Sacred sanctuary." It was risky. Reverend Hayes was known for preaching pro-slavery sermons, but he was also a man of faith. Perhaps, just perhaps. They rushed to the small white church, banging desperately on the back door. Reverend Hayes opened it, his expression shifting from irritation to shock at the sight of the son of the richest man in the region, accompanied by a slave girl, both sweaty and terrified. "Please," Samuel pleaded. "Please, in the name of Christ, help us." The Reverend heard the dogs approaching. He saw the torches through the trees. He had seconds to make a decision that would define not only their destinies, but his very soul. "Come in," he finally said. "Quickly." He hid them in the small attic above the sanctuary, a space so cramped they could barely fit lying down. "Don't make a sound," he whispered. "It doesn't matter what you hear." Minutes later, Master Whitmore and his men stormed the church. Master Whitmore was like a human storm when he entered the church, his muddy boots defiling the sanctuary. "Reverend Hayes, where is my son?" Reverend Thomas Hayes was 62 years old and had preached in that church for 35. He had baptized Samuel as a baby and had watched him grow up. He had also baptized Abigail, because even slaves needed to be baptized for the salvation of their primitive souls, or so he preached. "Jonathan, what's going on?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "Don't test me, Thomas. My son is with one of my slaves. They were here, I know they were." Hayes could hear the men searching the back of the church, opening cupboards, looking under the pews. In the attic above, Samuel held Abigail's hand, both barely daring to breathe. "Jonathan, even if they were, this is God's house. Sanctuary. Don't talk to me about God," Whitmore roared. "My son betrayed his race, his family, everything that is sacred, and you're going to talk to me about sanctuary?" The Reverend felt the weight of that moment. He had spent decades preaching that slavery was God's will. that black people were cursed descendants of Ham, that social hierarchy was divine order. But now, at this moment, God seemed to be asking, "Do you really believe this? Or did you just preach what was convenient?" "Look in the attic," one of the men suggested. Hayes' heart nearly stopped. He stared at the discreet trapdoor in the ceiling. One word from him, and Samuel and Abigail would be dragged out. Abigail would be whipped to death or worse. Samuel would be disinherited, possibly killed by his own father, or he could lie. A man of God, lying, but to save lives, to do what Christ would do. "There's nothing up there except cobwebs and wasps," Hayes said firmly. "I searched down there yesterday looking for some old books. My knees still ache from the climb." Whitmore stared at him, trying to read his soul. "Did you see them or not?" "I didn't see anyone," Hayes replied. Technically true. He hadn't seen them enter. He only heard their knocking on the door. For long seconds, Whitmore remained silent. Then, finally, "If I find out you lied to me, Thomas, our 30-year friendship won't save you." "I understand," Hayes said calmly. After Whitmore and his men left, Hayes waited a full hour before opening the trapdoor. Samuel and Abigail climbed down, their legs numb, their faces etched with terror. "Why?" Samuel asked. "Why did you save us?" Hayes sat heavily on a bench, suddenly looking much older. "Because I've spent 35 years preaching lies, boy. Pretty lies wrapped in Bible verses, but lies nonetheless. And tonight, God has given me a chance to tell the truth. Do you know what it will cost if my father finds out?" Samuel warned. "I know, but some prices are worth paying." Hayes looked at Abigail. "My daughter, I baptized you when you were 5 years old. I preached that you were inferior, that your color was a curse. I was wrong, so profoundly, terribly wrong. Forgive me." Abigail, with tears in her eyes, touched the old reverend's hand. "I forgive you, sir." Hayes then went into the sacristy and returned with an old Bible and a small bag of coins. "This is all I have. The Bible belonged to my father. The coins are savings from years. It's not much, but it's something." "Reverend, we can't," Samuel began. "Yes, they can, and they will." Hayes went to a cabinet and pulled out a map. "Here. This is the route to Memphis. There. Look for a man named Josiah. He's a conductor for the Underground Railroad. Tell him Thomas Hayes sent you. He'll know what to do." He looked out the window. "You have perhaps 3 hours until dawn. Go now, and may God be with you." Samuel hugged the old preacher. "Thank you for everything." "Don't thank me yet," Hayes said grimly. "The journey to freedom is long, and your father won't give up. He'll hunt you down to the ends of the earth. Then we'll have to run faster," Abigail said, her voice stronger now. They set out into the darkness, following the stars north. Behind them, Reverend Hayes knelt at the altar of his church and prayed, not the empty prayers he had recited for decades, but a true prayer from a broken heart. "Lord, forgive me for the years wasted preaching your crooked word. Use these 2 young men to teach me what true faith looks like." But while he was praying, he didn't know that Silas had stayed behind, hidden outside the church, watching everything through the window. And now Silas knew exactly where Samuel and Abigail were going. Samuel and Abigail traveled through the night and into the following day, hiding in abandoned barns and dense woods. The iron ring on Abigail's finger seemed to weigh more with each mile, not because it was heavy, but because of what it represented. A promise they might never be able to fully keep. On the 3rd day they arrived on the outskirts of Memphis. It was raining heavily, and they were soaked, hungry, and exhausted. But they were also alive, and that was more than many could manage. There, Samuel pointed to a small blacksmith shop with a discreet sign, "Josiah and Sons, Blacksmiths." It was the place Reverend Hayes had mentioned. Josiah was a free black man, a rarity in the South. Tall, strong, with hands calloused from working in the forge, he looked at Samuel and Abigail suspiciously as they entered. "Can I help you?" "Thomas Hayes sent us," Samuel said quietly. Josiah's expression changed immediately. He quickly closed the workshop door and lowered the curtains. Hayes? That old wolf? I never thought I'd see the day. How many are there? Just the two of us, Abigail replied. Josiah studied Samuel with curiosity. You are white, free. Why are you running away? Because the woman I love isn't, Samuel replied simply. And a world that says our love is a crime doesn't deserve my loyalty. Josiah nodded slowly. I respect that. But I need you to know. The journey from here to Canada is the most dangerous. Slave hunters are everywhere, and they are especially on the lookout for mixed couples. We are prepared, Samuel insisted. No, they're not, Josiah said frankly. But I'll help you anyway. Rest here tonight. Tonight I'll take you to the next station. A woman named Harriet, no, not that Harriet, another one, will take you from there. For the first time in days, Samuel and Abigail were able to relax, even if only a little. Josiah brought them food and clean water. He even allowed them to use his back room to sleep properly. Married before God, but not before men, Josiah observed, seeing the ring on Abigail. That changes today, if you wish. I can officiate. I am not ordained, but God knows what is in your hearts. And so, in a small blacksmith shop in Memphis, Tennessee, with only Josiah as a witness, Samuel Whitmore and Abigail exchanged vows again. This time, not in secret, but with dignity. Josiah recited passages from the Bible from memory, and when he finished, all three had tears in their eyes. Now they are one, Josiah declared. What God has joined together, let no man separate. But men were coming to do exactly that, because Silas had followed their trail, and now he was outside the forge with 5 slave hunters and an arrest warrant. The warrant described Abigail as fugitive property and Samuel as kidnapper. At 9 o'clock at night, they broke in. Josiah, Silas shouted. We know they're there. Hand them over and nobody gets hurt. Josiah quickly pushed Samuel and Abigail toward a hidden trap door beneath the forge. Follow the tunnel. It comes out 3 blocks from here to a house with a red door. Knock 3 times, then twice. Harriet will be waiting. And you? Samuel asked. I'll buy you some time. Now go. Samuel hesitated, but Abigail pulled him along. They descended into the narrow, dark tunnel while above, the door to the forge was being forced open. The hunters turned everything upside down, broke tools, destroyed the place, but they found no one. Where are they? Silas demanded, pressing a revolver against Josiah's head. I don't know what you're talking about, Josiah replied calmly, even with the cold barrel against his temple. You're going to pay for this, black man. Probably, Josiah agreed, but as long as I pay, they stay further away, and that's worth any price. Silas beat him brutally, but Josiah said nothing. Eventually frustrated, the hunters left, but they left guards watching the forge. Meanwhile, Samuel and Abigail emerged from the tunnel and found the house with the red door. They knocked on the correct door, and a small but fierce woman greeted them. Did Josiah send you? She asked. Yes, we are. Don't tell me your names. The less I know, the less I can tell if they catch me. She pulled them inside. Harriet, and you just used your only chance to escape. Josiah was just arrested. They're going to torture him for information, but he won't talk. That gives us maybe 24 hours before they track him here. Samuel and Abigail exchanged glances, horror on their faces. We need to go back, Samuel began. No, Harriet said firmly. Going back would be a waste of his sacrifice. The only way to honor what Josiah did is to move on. Do you understand? Reluctantly, they nodded. Good, because from now on it gets really difficult. The journey from Memphis to Canada took 3 agonizing months. Samuel and Abigail traveled through 8 states, hidden in false bottoms of wagons, in damp holds, in barns full of hay. Each station on the Underground Railroad brought new faces, new stories, new risks. In Ohio, they were nearly captured when a corrupt sheriff raided a driver's home. They escaped by minutes, leaving everything behind except each other. In Indiana, they met an entire family of runaway slaves, parents, 5 children, even the elderly grandmother. Seeing the 2-year-old baby sleeping peacefully in his mother's lap, unaware that every moment was dangerous, broke something in Samuel. He realized his decision to love Abigail wasn't just about the two of them. It was part of something bigger, a rebellion against an entire system of dehumanization. In Michigan, they received news through the network. Master Whitmore had placed a reward of $5,000, a fortune, for the capture of Abigail and the return of Samuel. The old man was spending his entire fortune to recover what he considered his property and his son. "He'll never stop," Abigail said one night as they waited in a cold attic. Maybe you should go back, make peace with him. You don't deserve this life on the run." Samuel turned her to face him, holding her face tenderly. "Abigail Whitmore, yes, Whitmore, because you are my wife. Listen to me carefully. I prefer a life on the run by your side to a lifetime of comfort without you. It's not a sacrifice if I freely choose. It's love." Finally, on a foggy September morning, they crossed the Detroit River to Windsor, Canada. When they set foot on Canadian soil, Abigail literally fell to her knees and cried. For the first time in her life, she was on land where she was legally free. Samuel knelt beside her, and they prayed together, thanking God for every anonymous driver, every lie told to protect them, every meal shared, every moment of grace. They settled in Chatham, a growing community of runaway slaves. Samuel worked as a carpenter. Abigail began teaching black children to read, the same crime for which she could have been killed in Mississippi. But here she was, celebrated. 2 years later, they received a letter. It was from Reverend Thomas Hayes. "My dear children in Christ," he wrote. "Josiah survived, though with permanent scars. He told me about his escape, and I couldn't be prouder. But I need you to know, your father, Jonathan Whitmore, passed away 3 months ago. His last word was Samuel. I don't know if it was regret or anger, but he left still searching for you. The plantation now belongs to his younger brother, James. And James is different. He freed all the slaves on the property, all of them. 127 souls are now free. He says it was your example that converted him. He saw your faith and could no longer live the lie. There's more. I'm sending this letter with money. Your inheritance that James insisted on sending. Not much, since freeing the slaves and giving them land cost almost everything. But it's something. But the real gift is this. James is transforming the plantation into a school where black and white children will learn together. He called it Whitmore Academy for All God's Children. And he asks, would you come back to help? Samuel and Abigail read the letter 3 times, hardly believing it. Would it be safe? Abigail asked. I'm still technically a fugitive. No more, Samuel said, pointing to another document in the envelope. It was a letter of emancipation, dated and signed by James Whitmore, declaring that Abigail, formerly known as the property of the Whitmore family, is and always has been free before God, and is now recognized as free before men. They returned to Mississippi in the spring of 1862, a year after the start of the Civil War. The plantation was unrecognizable. The cotton fields had been partially converted into community gardens. The main house now had classrooms, and the old slave quarters were being demolished, replaced by actual houses for the families who had chosen to stay. James Whitmore greeted them with tears. He was 8 years younger than Samuel, only 18 when Samuel ran away, but he had matured dramatically. Brother, he said, embracing Samuel, you saved me without knowing it. Seeing you choose love over privilege, faith over tradition, it changed everything for me. He turned to Abigail. Sister, because that's what you are now. Forgive me for the years I remained silent while you suffered on this property. Abigail hugged him, crying. You were just a child. And now, look what you've done. You've turned hell into hope. They stayed. Samuel and Abigail became teachers at Whitmore Academy. She taught literature and history. He taught carpentry and mathematics. Together, they taught the most important thing, that all human beings are equal before God, without exception. Mammy Ruth, now officially Ruth Washington, she chose the surname in honor of the first president, became the school's principal. She was 72 years old, but said, "I will live long enough to see generations of free children learn on this blood-stained land. I will transform this soil with hope." Samuel and Abigail had 4 children in the following years, 3 girls and 1 boy. Each of them grew up knowing the whole story, the forbidden love, the perilous escape, the sacrifices of courageous strangers. When the eldest son, Thomas, named after Reverend Hayes, asked why his parents had risked everything, Samuel replied, "Because true love doesn't calculate costs, and true faith doesn't compromise with injustice. His name is Thomas Hayes Whitmore. His name is in you because he chose truth over comfort, and I hope you will do the same, no matter the price." In 1868, 6 years after his return, Samuel received an unexpected visit. It was an elderly black man, walking with difficulty, but with unwavering dignity. "Josiah!" Samuel exclaimed, running to help him down from the chariot. "In the flesh," Josiah said with a smile. "I thought I'd visit the school I've heard so much about, the one my blacksmith shop helped build." That evening, Josiah had dinner with the Whitmore family, and after dinner, Samuel asked him to tell his story to the children. "Children," Josiah began, his voice still strong despite his age, "you see this world improving, and you think it's always been this way, but it wasn't. There was a time when people like your mother weren't considered people, when your parents' love was a crime, when helping someone be free could cost you your life." He showed the scars on his back, permanent marks from the beating he suffered. "These marks remind me of what I paid for your parents' freedom, and I don't regret any of them. Because look what grew from that seed, you, this school, this community." The youngest daughter, just 5 years old, touched the scars reverently and asked, "Did it hurt a lot?" "Yes, dear, it hurt a lot, but you know what would have hurt more? If I had stayed silent, if I had chosen security over justice. These scars heal, but a soiled conscience never heals." Reverend Thomas Hayes came to visit in 1870. He was 82 years old now, bent over but still lucid. Samuel and Abigail welcomed him as the hero he was. "Reverend," Abigail said, holding his frail hands, "you saved us, and in saving us, you saved all of these." She pointed to the 200 students playing in the schoolyard. Hayes shook his head, tears welling in his misty eyes. "No, daughter, you saved me. I was spiritually dead, preaching lies, serving systems of death. You showed me what true faith looks like. I should thank you." "Then let's thank God together," Samuel suggested. "Because in the end, he orchestrated everything." They prayed there, in the same place where slaves had once been sold, where families had been separated, where humanity had been denied. But now there were children laughing, learning, growing up free. Years later, when Samuel was 63 and Abigail 59, they sat together in the same spot by the river where they had first met. The iron ring, now worn but still on Abigail's finger, gleamed in the setting sun. "Was it worth it?" Samuel asked, even though he already knew the answer. Abigail looked at him with those same brown eyes that had captured him decades ago. Every moment of fear, every night sleeping in barns, every time we thought we wouldn't survive another day, yes, it was worth it, because we lived free, we loved freely, and we planted seeds of justice that are blossoming for generations. "Do you think they'll remember us?" Samuel asked. "In 50, 100 years? Perhaps not from us specifically," Abigail admitted, "but they will live in the freedom we paid for. They will love without fear because we were afraid first. They will have faith because we kept faith when it was impossible." She held his hand, intertwining their fingers. "We are just 2 people, Samuel, but 2 people willing to pay the price have changed hundreds of lives. and those hundreds will change thousands. That's how God works, through small acts of courage that echo into eternity. Samuel kissed her forehead. So let our echo be one of love. Love that refused to bow to injustice. Love that chose humanity over tradition. Love that believed that God is greater than any human system of oppression. Amen, Abigail whispered. Amen, Doctor. Marcus Whitmore was in the Chatham Cemetery, Canada, looking at two gravestones side by side. Samuel Whitmore, 1833-1902, he chose love over privilege. Abigail Whitmore, 1838-1905, she chose faith over fear. Marcus was their great-great-grandson, a history professor at Howard University. He had spent 5 years researching his ancestors' history, tracing every step of their journey. He discovered letters, diaries, and records from the Underground Railroad. He found descendants of Josiah, Reverend Hayes, and even some of the slave hunters who pursued them. Each piece revealed more of the extraordinary story. But the most impactful discovery came when he traced all of Samuel and Abigail's descendants. There were now over 2,000 direct descendants spread across 3 continents. Among them, 47 teachers, 12 pastors, 8 doctors, 3 judges, countless parents, grandparents, people living free lives because 2 individuals refused to accept that their love was impossible. Whitmore Academy still existed, now a prestigious charter school in Mississippi. The original building had been preserved as a museum, and every year, on the anniversary of its founding, they told the story. Marcus had been invited to speak this year. He stood at the same river where his ancestors had first met and said to the assembled crowd, Samuel Whitmore was white, privileged, and had everything to lose. Abigail was a slave, powerless, and had everything to fear. But they refused to let a broken world define their love. They risked everything, literally everything, because they believed that God makes no distinction between his children. Today, I am here because they loved. You are here because people like Josiah took risks. This school exists because Reverend Hayes chose truth over tradition. Their stories remind us, when you see injustice, you have a choice. You can be complicit in your silence or complicit in resistance. Samuel, Abigail, Josiah, Reverend Hayes, all chose to resist. And that resistance, born of love and sustained by faith, changed the world. So ask yourself, what choice are you making today? What love are you willing to fight for? What injustice are you willing to confront, no matter the cost? The crowd fell silent for a moment, then erupted in applause. But Marcus didn't hear. He was looking at the river, and for a moment he swore he could see them, a young white man and a young black woman, sitting together on the riverbank, praying, loving, daring to believe in a better future. And that future was now. This story is a tribute to the countless interracial couples who defied miscegenation laws during slavery and beyond. Although Samuel and Abigail are fictional, their experiences reflect real stories of love that refuse to be limited by injustice. The Underground Railroad was real, with conductors like Josiah risking everything to help others achieve freedom. Estimates suggest that 100,000 people escaped through this network between 1810 and 1865. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more true stories of faith, courage, and love that transformed the world. Stories that remind us that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they choose love over fear, justice over tradition, and humanity over systems of oppression. Sign up now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next inspiring stories. Leave a comment below. Which part of the story touched you the most? And do you know of any similar love stories that defied the conventions of their time? Remember, every great change in history began with ordinary people making extraordinary choices. What choice will you make today?